okay? Behind the scenes, we have set up some DMAAIs on a screen just like the one that you're looking at. Now, programmatically, inside of P4114, it knows that it needs to use DMAAI tables 4122 and 4124 in order to look up the entry in order to find the right accounts. So 4122 would be the debit, 4124 would be the credit, or if you want to look at it a different way, 4122 is typically the balance sheet account and 4124 would be the expense. So the program is going to look up, depending on what company you do the transaction in, what the document type is, in our case an IA, and the GL class of the item that you're transacting in order to find the accounts to make the entries. Of course, now it knows the unit cost and that stuff, and it will do the appropriate debit and credit inside the general ledger in the right accounts. Okay, so that's how DMAAIs work. So this setup can be very, very complicated. It could be very intense. Your system may have just a few hundred entries in here, or it could have hundreds of thousands of entries, depending on how many doc types you use, how many companies, and how many geo class codes you configure. Okay, so just a quick overview of how the setup is done. If you are fortunate enough in your company to have access to FastPath, you can type in DMAAI to get to this setup screen. The data behind the scenes, for those of you who like to write reports or to check out things in programming, the table number is F4095. Okay, so there are many DMAAI tables and many setups to do. Okay, now inside of each of these tables that you see listed, you're going to put in all your company numbers, the appropriate document types, the GL class codes, etc., and the account number. So the account number is broken down into the business unit or branch plant, the object account, and the subsidiary account. Now, it's important to know that these account numbers are not validated. So as you type them in here, it is not going to the account master and saying, oh, this is valid or invalid. So it's basically a free-form field that you're typing in here. So you need to be careful in how you actually put the data in. Now, the key to this is company, doc type, and geo class. So if I cannot have more than one entry for these specific fields, otherwise the screen will error. Okay, so I can only have one entry per company, per doc type, per geo class. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about the use of wildcards. And by wildcards, I mean company 0 and the asterisk for the GL class. So what this does is it's going to bring something called hierarchies into play. So when you set up DMAAIs, you can be absolutely specific on every single DMAAI you want to put in. So that means the exact company number, the exact document type, the exact geo class code gives you this account. You find, though, sometimes if you want to do that, you will end up with thousands and thousands and thousands of DMAAI entries that you may not need to key in. So JD Edwards has provided these mechanisms in order to circumvent all that data entry. Right? So if you have a template that you can use for a particular DMAAI, let's say that applies to all companies, then just if you enter it under company 0, then you don't have to keep repeating it for all the different companies. Okay, so now let's just take a look at if you do use these wildcards, what the hierarchy looks like for that and how the JD Edwards inventory programs look up the appropriate DMAAI to do the right GL transaction. So we're going to have an example here, and we're going to use in our example company 100, and the item that we're transacting has a GL class code of IN20. Okay, so the first thing that's going to happen is, and let's say we're doing that inventory adjustment, the adjustment program is going to go to DMAAI 4122, and it's going to look for an entry that contains exactly company 100 specifically, and specifically GL class IN20. But let's say in our configuration we used wildcards. Well, if it doesn't find one, the next thing it will do is it will say, oh, did we enter a company 100 record, but we have asterisk for our GL class. So asterisk means I don't care what the GL class is, just use this one. Okay, so that is the second tier of the hierarchy. The next tier is to say, oh, I've found an entry, I didn't find this one. So I'm looking for an entry now that has a specific GL class code that matches what I have, or what I'm using, and is there a company 0 entry for that? If I find that, I'll use it. If not, the last place I look is for a record where the company is 0 and the GL class is asterisk. So this means any transaction for any company with any GL class code, use this one if I cannot find a specific one. So you'll notice the first thing it does is it looks for the most specific entry, then it gets a little looser in its criteria, and then it gets a little bit more loose with the company number, then finally this is the catch-all. Now, if we go through each of these 4 steps of the hierarchy and the program still cannot find a right entry, then you're going to get an error message saying that the DMAAI cannot be found, the transaction cannot be completed because the system does not know how to create the journal entry. Okay, so that is how company 0 and the 4 asterisks are used. Okay, so with that, what I'd like to do is bring up my first poll question. And the poll question is going to be, for an inventory adjustment of an IA transaction with company 1, the item has a specific GL class of IN20, which DMAAI will be used? So based on what you just learned, okay, you should be able to see the poll, and if you guys can just click on the appropriate solution, we'll wait for a couple minutes and then I will reveal the answer. Okay, I'll give it about another 30 seconds or so. Okay, I think we pretty much have everybody. Let me close this, and I see that most of you have selected company 1 GL class asterisk. So if I click over here, the answer is number 3, you would be correct. So the vast majority of you have this correct. So let's think about it. So it's going to look for the first thing, an exact entry of IN20 company 1. Do I see an IN20 with company 1? No. So what's the next step? I look for an exact company number with the asterisks, and that's the DMAAI that I have. So very good, very good. A lot of people got this correct. Okay. Now, the next few slides, I'm not going to go through in painstaking detail, but these slides will be available to you to use as a reference, and I would recommend that you actually get them. Okay, so the way that I put these together is that there are 4 modules that impact your inventory, your quantities on hand, your values. It's the inventory, sales, purchasing, and manufacturing system. So the next 4 slides are going to cover each one of those. Okay, now notice that there's a number in the title. I wanted to bring this up because this is another handy little tip that I found that over the years really helps you understand how JD Edwards is put together. And the 41 means it's a system code. So inventory is system code 41. You'll notice that the DMAAI tables all start with 41. So that means that they're inventory. The programs that use to run the transactions all start with P41. So you'll notice the tables will start with F41. So when you see that, the 41, you're thinking inventory. If you have FastPath and you have access to the main JD Edwards default menus, if you type G41 in FastPath, you will come to the inventory main menu. So the system code, in knowing the system codes, becomes very helpful when you start to understand, you're looking at a program number, you're looking at a table number. The first two characters mean something. So in this case, it's inventory. So I wanted just to share that with you. Okay, the way these tables are put together now is that you see that the transaction types are grouped, or the programs are grouped. So the P4112, 4113, 14, and 16, those are the issues, transfers, adjustments, and reclasses. Okay, we'll all use all of these for AAIs. Okay, so the 4122 for the balance sheet, the 4124 for expense. I don't know if you're familiar with the zero balance adjustment transactions, but there are a different set of AAIs for that. Okay. Standard cost variance 4141 gets kicked in only on IT transactions. If you're doing an IT transaction from location A to location B and there are different costs involved, okay, then the cost difference will get expensed to 4141. Okay. So group 2, these different transactions, the quantity revisions, branch revisions, batch cost, generate by default an IB transaction. Those use the 4134, 4136. So I think you're starting to get the drill here. So cycle counts and tag counts will use the 4152, 4154, default document type PI, and the future cost update is the write downs of the 4172, 4174. Now this is not intended to be every single DMAAI that is in JD Edwards, but these are the ones that are used the vast majority of the time. There are more complex transactions that will involve other DMAAIs, but again, this is just a basic intro into this, and we provide information, again, that will cover about 95% of the transactions that you do. Okay, and moving on, we'll go to purchasing. Purchasing is system code 43. You'll see that we have the tables that start with 43, the programs that start with 43. So the receipt program, you see some of the DMAAIs that come into play here, right? We have voucher match, and then some other ones specifically for landed costs and taxes. They have their own sets of DMAAIs that come into play. Okay, so a quick look at the sales. Okay, now what's interesting about sales is that the DMAAIs don't come into play when I actually do the ship confirm, right? So if I ship confirm something out to a customer, my inventory goes down during that process, but I still might need to run invoicing, bills of ladings, advanced ship notices until I get those sales orders into a status that will run through sales update at night. So sales update is the program that creates all the journal entries for your shipping transactions. Okay, we usually generate typically an RI invoice, and these are all the tables with their descriptions that come into play. So we'll see cost of goods sold, revenue, where the inventory gets credited, so on and so forth. And then finally, manufacturing, we'll see system codes 3132. Okay. Manufacturing accounting and variance accounting are the two main programs that create journal entries, and we can see the DMAAIs that are involved here. Now, I've looked at a lot of DMAAI setups in my career, and one thing that I've noticed is if whoever is setting up the DMAAIs, they're not quite sure what they're doing, sometimes you will get something like, oh, let's say I have an IB document type set up in 3110. Well, an IB in 3110, a cost change, will never get used. Okay, you will be able to enter it, but the IB is a cost change program. That cost change is in the inventory system, not in manufacturing. So if you put inventory documents in the manufacturing system, their entries will be there, but they will never be invoked. Okay, so I always, when I look, make sure that nothing looks out of place as far as somebody just typing in stuff and not really understanding what exactly they're doing. Okay, so another purpose for these tables, and they're used as a reference, you can also take care of that as well. So I don't want to see IV transactions or IV document types in 3110. They don't belong there. Okay, so let's do poll question number 2. Okay, I talked to you a little bit about system codes. The system codes were on the slides. Okay, again, I think it's a very handy thing to know, even if you only know these 4, right? So, which system code is represented by 42? So, we saw the system codes. I'll open it up. I'll give it a minute or so, let you guys chime in, and then we'll kind of move forward. Okay, about another 30 seconds or so. And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, I'm going to close this poll. The vast majority picked number 2 for sales. So if I come back, of course, you would all be correct. You can see the system code numbers here. Now, again, this is not directly related to DMAAIs, but it is a very, very handy piece of information to have. And know that there are many more system codes there. So if you work in finance, you might want to know the ARAP, GL ones. All that list is available to you right inside of JD Edwards. Okay, moving on. Let's talk a little bit about line types. Now, what is a line type? It's used on sales orders and purchase orders. So if I key in a line item on a purchase order, I must assign a line type to that individual line. So line 1 will have a line type, line 2 will have a line type, same with sales orders. Okay, notice in the setup, right, this is the setup screen. The line type is not assigned to a sales order or purchase order. A line type is a line type. It can be used on either. But there are settings that you assign to the line types that tell JD Edwards how to behave when you use them. Okay, so the thing that we want to focus on is this inventory interface. And notice the values that are here. You can see a Y, you can see an N, you can see a B. Okay. Now, when I do a transaction on a sales order or a purchase order, and I have the line type, and let's say I'm using a line type of BN for non-stock. Well, non-stock has the inventory interface turned off. Okay, when the inventory interface is turned off, it cannot get the GL class it needs for the DMAAIs from an item master, from an item location, because we turn the inventory system off. Okay, so I can still have a line on a purchase order or sales order that is a non-stock item. In that case, I still, in order to use DMAAIs, I still need to create journal entries. I still need a GL class code to use to go look up the right account numbers. So where now would I get that GL class code from? Okay, well, as it turns out, it is part of the line type setup. Okay, so if your inventory interface is a type N or a type A, the GL class code that gets used will come right from here, right from the setup itself. Okay, so important to know that sometimes if you're trying to debug a DMAAI, if you're looking at an error report and you're saying, why would it use this geo class code? It's not associated with that item. Well, somebody could have put an item number on a sales order and used a different line type where the inventory interface was turned off. Okay, then it would get the geo class code from here and not from the item master or item location. So you can see in this table below, depending on the interface, how that's set, the inventory interface, where does the geo class come from? Okay, so the fold of the line type, right? So NRA comes from the fold of the line type, right? And that's what this is. When it says the fold, that's an old world term because you used to have to press a function key to unfold it. But it means that it comes from this column right here. So it's part of the line type setup. Okay, so I just wanted to bring that up. Sometimes when you debug DMAAIs, it's not straightforward as to where these values come from. Okay, so with that said, I'm going to do my last poll question now, and that is going to be, if a purchase order line is received and the inventory interface is line type N, right, which geo class code is used? Where does it come from? Okay, so I'll give that a minute or so, let people chime in on that one. Okay, we'll give it a few more seconds here. Okay, and I am going to close the poll. And again, wow, 82% says number 4, line type setup, and you would indeed be correct. So our audience today is either very smart, which I'm sure you are, and you've been paying attention. Okay, so these questions, and maybe I just made them too easy. Okay, so let's continue. I'm going to do some helpful tips here. The first one is going to be the use of a model table. Okay, if you're from finance, you know the term model chart of accounts. So basically, it's a template that if you're setting up a new company and you want to get a quick chart of accounts in there, you could set up a model, you copy the model, and then you make the small changes to get it going in a hurry. Well, we can use the same concept for DMAAIs. So what you can do is you can pick one table. So for example, if I use the inventory system, I use 4152, I choose that table, I choose my default document type of physical inventory, PI, and I spend a lot of energy making sure that that table is set up correctly. Okay, meaning I have my specific companies in there, I have all my geo class codes in there, I have my PI, I only need one document type here, a PI, and I get this all set up. What it acts like is a cross-reference now. It will say for every company, for this transaction and this GL class code, here is my balance sheet inventory account I want to report these items into, right? So if I have a GO class code, let's say of RM01 for raw materials, okay, I would, in here, I would say, oh, let me put a PI entry in for RM01, and then my business unit object and subsidiary would be my raw material inventory account. If I had a finished goods GO class, FGO1, my business unit object and subsidiary would be my finished goods inventory account. Okay, so now what you have is, I know my RM is raw materials, here's the account number. I have my FGO1 is finished goods, here's the account number. I lay that out and I get that exactly the way I want it. So I'm only focused on one table. Then what you can do now is look at all the other DMAAI tables that are balance sheet side of transactions. So you see the whole list over here, everything highlighted in green. So now what you can do is you can copy this 4152 to the 3110, to the 3130, to the 4122, so on and so forth, because it acts as a template. Okay. Now, you may want to use some wildcards to minimize your data entry, but again, I don't recommend it. There are places for it, but inventory balance sheet typically isn't one of them. If you're doing a, let's say, a transfer order from branch A to branch B and you're using the STOT process and you only have one in-transit account, well, that's where the wildcards come into play, because it doesn't matter what GL class it is. When I ship it, I want it to go in transit. That is a perfect application of the use of wildcards. Okay, but if you tend to overuse them when you set up these individual tables, what happens is you will process transactions. They may not go to the accounts you want them to go to, but you will never see an error because the wildcard would take over. So we want to drive errors, okay, if we don't have the right setup in place. So again, a model table concept allows you to quickly compare all these tables to the model to see where the differences are. And that will help you find potential reconciling items. Okay, next, debugging. When I do an interactive transaction, an interactive inventory transaction is a System 41 transaction, which is an issue, adjustment, a transfer, a reclass, a cycle count. Okay, those transactions will error right on the screen when you do them. Okay, so if I do that inventory adjustment and the DMAAI is not set up, when I try to enter that transaction, I will get an error. The error will look much like what you see here. And you can see the text. It says distribution AAI error number 4122 invalid. Okay, and in the text it says, here's the company, here's the transaction type, here's the GL class code. Okay, it's not defined, it's missing. So we need to go set it up. Okay, so that's how you can debug an interactive transaction. Okay, another example of an interactive transaction is a purchase order receipt. Okay, so inventory transactions, the issues, adjustment, transfers, PO receipts, those are all interactive. As opposed to batch transactions. Batch transactions happen on work orders and sales orders. Okay, because those need programs to run at the end of the day in order to create the journal entries. So sales and manufacturing do it with a batch job. So it's not interactive on the screen in front of you. It is running as a job on the night schedule. When that job runs, if it's trying to create entries and there are DMAAI issues, then what will happen is you will get an error report that looks similar to this. So this is the one for the R3102A, which is manufacturing accounting. And here you can see an example of the output that says, oh, for DMAAI number 3120, GL category code G08, my cost type of XB is missing. Okay, so we need to go set this up. Okay, it doesn't say right on this report that it's missing. However, if you go to your work center, you will see the error message, or the work center that the job is run under. Then you will see the details for this transaction, and it will tell you that that setup is missing, right? So we have two ways for debugging errors. We have interactive jobs that will tell you right on the screen as you're doing the transaction. And for sales and manufacturing, it's the batch programs that run at night. There will be an exception report that kicks out, pointing out any DMAAI errors. Okay, so what I'd like to do now is just do a real quick introduction on our product, RapidReconciler, which was designed specifically for JD Edwards, and it does a really good job in assisting in reconciling the inventory, goods in transit, received not vouchered. Okay, so the benefits of using this product, the thing that we're talking about today, is the mismatched DMAAIs. So if we have that model table concept and we want to do the comparison to all those other DMAAIs, well, RapidReconciler does that for you. Okay. So we also have other, built-in integrity reports that don't come with JD Edwards. We have a GL class code report that points out any discrepancies, if there are mismatches between the branch, the item master, the location, that can cause variances, all types of things like that. Okay, frozen cost variances. We also have some back-end process reporting. If we're missing work orders, they didn't make it to manufacturing accounting, something stuck and didn't get to sales update. We have missing headers in the batches. For some reason, they're not posted. All of these things are just pointed out directly by RapidReconciler, and we use a transaction-based inventory model. So we add up the Cardex transactions to state your balance, and we compare it to the balance to make sure your balances are accurate. Okay, so with that, what I'd like to do is I want to show you kind of what RapidReconciler looks like and what those DMAAI reports look like inside of the product. Okay, this is the RapidReconciler interface with some test data. You can see we have a couple of companies here. We use the model DMAAI to determine what companies, business units, objects, and subsidiaries represent the inventory balance sheet. Okay, so here you can see we pull the information from JD Edwards, we get a GL number, we do the Cardex calculation based on the model table, and we match it up to see the value of inventory, and we do a comparison to see if you're in balance or not. Okay, we also quantify all of the different sources of variance. So anything here that's a non-zero means we need to drill down and take a look at some of the details and try to figure out what's going on. And so it's a pretty slick little process to keep your inventory in balance and just take a lot of the time and manual effort out of doing that. Okay, as part of this product, we have built-in integrity reports, and we have our first three here are dedicated to DMAAIs. So the first one is we have a DMAAI report just as you've entered them. Okay, so you'll see all, if there's a company zero entry, you'll see it. You'll see the asterisks if you have entered those. Okay, we've added additional columns, the manufacturing, whether they're expense or inventory accounts, table numbers, all this type of information that you see, which you can export to Excel pretty easily if you want to review your DMAAIs. The second one is the model table. Now, the model table is that 4152 PI, or in our case, we use the 99 doc type here. In here, we put in all the geo classes and all the different account numbers that represent this. And then once we have this model all vetted out, what we do is we use the DMAAI integrity to say, okay, now that we have our model table, let's go through each one of the other ones and see if they match or they don't match. Okay, so in this case, we have a mismatch object account. So you'll see it'll actually point it out to you. So these will need to be reviewed. We have something like net zero review. Well, if you look in 4152 for an IP, the debit and credit come in and out of the same account. So this will actually do nothing on the GL. Is that what you really want? So we have a built-in integrity report, and this report comes in very useful. We've debugged a lot of DMAAIs using this report for our RapidReconciler customers. So I just wanted to end the presentation showing you that, we do have a product that does help. DMAAIs can be quite complicated, but we have a process that works very well in getting any discrepancies figured out. Now, in here, what we also do is if you overuse the company zero and the asterisk, we build a full set. So we can tell you what's going on discreetly, even though you might use wildcards. So that's something that you would not be able to do with JD Edwards. Okay, so with that, what I'd like to do is turn it back over to Brooke, and we'll get some housekeeping done, and then we'll move on to a Q&A. So Brooke, if you could.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much, Ed. Let me Okay. All right, Ed. Did you want to cover the proof of concept?
I will. Okay, so one of the offerings that we're going to do here today is something called a proof of concept. And a proof of concept is a demonstration of RapidReconciler using your data. So what we can do is we can report issues back to you that we find within the product just using a single snapshot. Okay, so we can make a list, tell you kind of what's going on with your system, whether there are DMAAI errors or not, in addition to other things some of those integrity reports can find. Now, typically, this proof of concept, you can see it's $49.95, but for those of you attending the webinar today, if we can get a commitment within 45 days, you can see that we will do it for $9.99. So I just wanted to mention that to you. This proof of concept process has been very, very good for us, meaning that a vast majority of those who go through with the proof of concept see the value of RapidReconciler and then move forward with the purchase. So I wanted to make sure that I brought that up before we ended.
Great. Thank you so much, Ed. And thank you for your great presentation. All right. I just want to cover a few follow-up items, and then we'll move into our question and answer section of our webcast. Our webcast today is part of GSI's free ongoing educational webcast series on JD Edwards, and our upcoming webcasts are currently listed on the screen. And then to view our most up-to-date schedule, just go to getgsi.com/JD Edwards webcasts. All right, so also, I just wanted to let everybody know we have a couple of workshops coming up. We have a how to use JD Edwards E1 Orchestrator, a hands-on workshop, which will be held on Thursday, September 19th from 8 a.m. to 4:15 p.m. And then we also have another hands-on orchestrator workshop in Houston, Texas on Tuesday, October 1st. And we also have a JD Edwards Enterprise One Workshop 9.2 Upgrade Workshop in Dallas, Texas on Thursday, October 3rd. And to register for those events, you can go to getgsi.com/JD Edwards conferences and events, and they will all be listed there. Okay, so now I just wanted to remind you that we provide extensive free educational resources for the JD Edwards community, which includes our weekly educational webcasts like you're on today, our monthly newsletter called the GSI Insider, our online resource center where you can access our on-demand webcasts, white papers, and so much more. And we also provide on-site and virtual workshops. Now, if you would like to sign up for our weekly email reminders for upcoming webcasts or our monthly newsletter, or to create an account in our resource center, you can go to getgsi.com, and then you'll go to resources and events on the main page, and then you can select JD Edwards, and then you'll see webcast, resource center, blog, and so forth right here on the right side of your screen. All right, well, I see we have had a few questions already submitted. I would like to remind everybody that if you want to submit a question, you can still do so through the GoToWebinar console window on the right side of your screen. And if you minimize your console earlier, please click the left-facing arrow key to redisplay the questions panel. All right. Ed, are you ready?
I am ready.
Okay, perfect. Let's get rolling on these questions. So, our first question, it's from Dennis, and he said, how long does it take to get RapidReconciler connected and installed?
Well, loaded question, Dennis, but I will answer for you. That's going to depend if you have a server ready. So the database that RapidReconciler uses is Microsoft SQL Server. So if you have a server available and ready, we can install it in just a few hours. So we do a read-only from JD Edwards. We use integration services as part of SQL Server to port the data over. The users will log into a web page to actually see the result set. Nothing has to be installed on their machines, but point I want to make is that your business data never leaves your firewall. So even though the users access the application through their browser, your business data stays secured behind your firewall. So we have kind of a hybrid solution that does that. So all in all, it's less than a day to get it hooked up. We come on site to do a couple days training with your end users, and then you're off and running.
Okay, great. Our next question is from Bill, and he said, how can I get copies of the slides for this presentation? And I had another question from Philomena, and she asked the same thing. We will be sending you an email with a link to our resource center where you can access the copy of the presentation, as well as like the PowerPoint slides, as well as a recording of the webcast today. All right, so I have another question here, Ed, from Jeff, and he said, are your target our econ users finance business?
Oh, yeah, I see it.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yes, I see it. Okay, Jeff, the target users are cost accountants, although a business analyst may need to get involved for certain failed transactions. Okay, what we do is we'll provide for each reconciling item a detailed listing of the transactions themselves. Like, so for example, let's say we had a sales order ship confirm that hit the item ledger for $100 but ended up in the general ledger for 110. So there's some kind of discrepancy. So you would be able to get a report for that transaction that listed all the Cardex entries, all the GL entries, what RapidReconciler did with it, all the sales order lines that were associated with it, plus all the DMAAIs that contributed to that transaction. Okay, so you could be able to see it all in one report. Now, there's no golden button or golden comment that says, oh, this DMAAI is set up incorrectly. It doesn't go to that level. That's why you need a bit of a skill set with DMAAIs to look at that and say, okay, here's what the issue is. But the day-to-day user is going to be a cost accountant or an inventory manager, somebody in finance.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Ed. We have another question from Dennis, and he said, will RapidReconciler check differences between Cardex and item location table and show us the root cause? The root cause, I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, root cause. Okay, between Cardex and item location, the answer is yes. To show you the root cause, the answer is no. We can show you the items, we can show you how far they're off, but the root cause, it could be anything. It's not that sophisticated where it's going to say there was a table lock, for example, or there was a conflict with another job. Those type of things, I don't know of any software that can do that. Okay, but what we can do is give you the end result to say these 7 transactions for this item in the Cardex added up to 100 units. Your on-hand balance is only showing 98 units. You're missing 2. That we can do, and we do that.
Okay, great. And I've got one more question here. Ed, the question is from Mark, and he said, we have multiple instances of JDE. How would RapidReconciler handle that?
Okay, so RapidReconciler, the way it would be set up would be one RapidReconciler database per instance of JD Edwards. So it wouldn't even matter at that point if you, let's say you were running 2 instances of World and 3 of E1. It doesn't matter. RapidReconciler could have 5 databases on one SQL server and handle all of it. Okay, it will not combine the data sets and put them together. It can't, because it doesn't know, a short item in one system could have a different a second item number than the short item in the second system. So you can't really put them together that way. Okay, so it would still be separate, but it would be one-to-one.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Ed, for your presentation, and everybody for your great questions. And so that appears to be the end of our questions for today. And as a follow-up from today's webcast, We ask that you complete a short 1-minute survey when you exit, and you will be receiving an email with a link to our resource center on our website where you can access the recording from today's webcast as well as a copy of the presentation. And after today's webcast, we will do the drawing for the $25 Amazon gift card, and anyone that attended the entire webcast will be eligible, and we will notify the winner. If you have any follow-up questions, you can contact Ed, Bill Craig, or myself, and we will get back to you. And our contact info is currently listed on the screen. And thanks again, Ed, for your presentation, and everybody for attending, and we hope that you have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.